Hi, everyone. Greetings and welcome to Globally Connected at FIT. I'm Helen Gaudet, Assistant Dean for International Education and one of the co-founders of this talk series. Beginning in 2020, Globally Connected at FIT is a series of 45-minute-long virtual discussions designed to advance global education. And they are led by students, faculty, alumni, with invited friends and colleagues from around the world. This semester, Suzanne Getz is joining me as she's chair of textiles and surface design, and she's joining me as co-organizer. And we continue to be sponsored by History of Art, International Programs, and the Cultural Fellows Program. So today it is my honor to welcome Professor Lorenza Wong from Textile Development and Marketing, Francis Van Hesselt, who is a mohair textile designer joining us from South Africa, Bupe Mucheka, who's a cultural fellow and an AMC student, and of course, Elizabeth Way from the Museum of FIT. And they're going to talk to us today about textiles in Africa with a focus on South Africa. So thank you all.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to get started by sharing a little bit about the current exhibition that is on at the museum at FIT. I am hopefully sharing my screen now, and so I'll get started. So Africa's Fashion Diaspora is an exhibition that looks at ideas of transnational Blackness. And by transnational Blackness, I really specifically am thinking about the ways in which communities who identify as Black around the diaspora, so in this context, I mean on the continent of Africa, as well as in North and South America, Europe, and the Caribbean, and the ways in which they define themselves as communities individually, but also the ways in which they create dialogues and cultural production in parallel across the diaspora. And this is through fashion design, and I particularly am looking here at fashion design as storytelling. So I will show sorry. So here you can see a picture of the exhibition gallery. The exhibition is on view at the museum at FIT until December 29th. So if you're interested, please do visit us. But in this talk, I want to talk specifically about some of the designers who are based in South Africa and are also utilizing textiles in a really special way in their textile or in their fashion designs. So the first piece I want to highlight is by Sindiso Khumalo. So this is in a section in the exhibition called A Black Atlantic. And here I'm looking specifically at the ways in which designers are looking outside of their kind of cultural experience at Black cultures other than their own for their inspiration. So this is a collection that Sindiso Khumalo designed around Harriet Tubman. And she talked about how important and inspiring Tubman's story was, but also that it was little known in South Africa, and it was a story she wanted to share. But specifically thinking about this cotton textile, she designed it in collaboration with Cape Town artist Shakil Solanke. And they created this toile de joie textile with images that represented Tubman's life. And so specifically through two botanical illustrations. One is a cotton plant that symbolizes Tubman's enslavement. And the second is the Philadelphia fleabane, a flower which Sindiso Khumalo conceptualized as the first flower that Tubman would have seen when crossing into freedom in Pennsylvania. So here we can see this really evocative use of textile design to help tell the story, the narrative of the exhibition. And we see her, Sindiso Khumalo, drawing this back to her own experience as a South African through the silhouette of this dress that references 19th century influences in South African dress. So the next designer I want to speak about is an older brand called Stone Cherry. And this is an amazing brand that was founded in South Africa, in Johannesburg, around the turn of the 21st century. And the designer, Nakahansi Nkosi, was really well known for these t-shirts like the one that you see here. This is something that she donated to us at MFIT around 2016. And so she licensed the cover of Drum magazine for these t-shirts. And this was a vital outlet for the vibrant culture and anti-apartheid movements of Black South Africans during the 1950s. One of the only ways in which media was capturing the life of Black South Africans. And Nakahansi Nkosi was really conscious of the idea that as Black South Africans were creating a culture and a life for themselves in the post-apartheid period, that this history, the history of their grandparents or their parents, would be a really vital part in moving forward into the future. And so through the graphics that she applied to this t-shirt and t-shirts like it, she was trying to talk about history and its important place in creating modern society. And then the last designer I want to talk about is Thebe Magugu, a really exciting, vibrant young designer who's had a lot of international impact in our contemporary international fashion system. And we have 3 pieces by him included in the exhibition. So this first piece is from his genealogy collection, in which he is really looking at the influence of his specific family on his fashion design. So pictures of his grandmother, his aunts, and his mother, which you see in the press photo for this ensemble here. So with this textile design, he's taking commemorative cloth, wax printed cloth that is used not only in South Africa, but in West Africa and other parts of the continent as a way of nonverbal communication, a way of documenting history and current events. Typically, these cartouches hold the images of politicians or more famous people. But here, Magugu uses images from his own family to create this purple textile that you see here. So it's not a cotton print. This is actually a poly because it's a raincoat. But here he takes this idea of culture through textiles and boils it down to the individual. And for him, this collection was really about memory, and memory as a reservoir for optimism, something, he was going through a period of depression and isolation during the pandemic. And so he really looked to his own family to bring him out of that. The second piece by Thebe Magugu is from his heritage collection. So these heritage collections this is the second one, are collections in which he celebrates the cultures of the different ethnic cultures of South Africa. So each collection includes 9 different designs that pay tribute to 9 different ethnic groups. This one specifically looks at the Botswana ethnic group, of which he is a part. He's also a part of the Pede ethnic group. And for this heritage collection, he's looking at mothers and children. And so not only documenting them through these beautiful graphics, and he partnered with the graphic artist Fatu Mbili to create these graphics. This is an artist that he collaborates with frequently for his collections. Not only is he graphically representing the traditions and rituals around motherhood and maternity within these ethnic groups, he also enlisted folklorists and anthropologists to write down these traditions, which he archives on his website. And the last piece I want to talk about is the last Thebe Magugu in the exhibition. And this is in a section called Transcendent and Supernatural. And the designers in this section are looking at mythology and religion and folk tales as a inspiration for their collections. So this collection is called Folklorics, and this particular piece is called Shipwreck. And so he designed this textile that you see, this ocean and the shipwreck, but it really alludes to the figure of the Mamiwata, which is a siren or mermaid-like creature that is kind of known for luring sailors, bringing down ships. But really what he's kind of been capturing in this textile design is this idea of femininity, and femininity, when it becomes powerful, it becomes dangerous. And so in this way, we see how this diasporic figure, the Mamiwata, prevalent South Africa and West Africa, also in the Caribbean, we see how these ideas travel in the form of religion, folklore, mythology. So that is just a very, very short preview, specifically looking at the South African designers and their beautiful textiles in the exhibition. But again, we're open till December 29th. If you're in New York, please visit us. So I'm going to stop sharing now.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I can't wait to see it, and this is really exciting pieces. I'm not sure who's next.
Francis?
Francis, can you share your screen?
Please unmute. Francis.
you hear me?
We can hear you, but we did
Okay.
just lose your screen. So sorry.
No, I just wanted to check if you could hear me. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Is that good? I can't see anyone. Okay, so
Well,
Hold on.
we
Not sharing.
can hear you, but we can't see your screen, your slides.
can you see me now?
This is perfect.
Yes.
We can hear and see. Yep.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Hi. I feel very privileged to be part of this conversation, so thank you all. I think that before we start, for me, it's really important to stress that the topic of African textiles is a very broad one. We're a big continent and it's super rich in its history and its textile practice. So I'm going to be sharing just a little bit about what I do in a tiny little studio in the South African desert called the Karoo. And I think it's important for everyone to know that even within our tiny town or in neighboring areas, that the history and the practice and the materials used vary specifically according to who's doing that. But to talk about what we do, I am a textile designer and entrepreneur, and I focus specifically on developing mohair textiles locally. I grew up on a family farm in the Karoo, so I have a very deep affinity to the fiber and to the place and the people. And I work in a woman-led studio based in this area, and I collaborate with a team of phenomenal women artisans. And what we do is together we try to weave stories about the origin of our textiles, while at the same time allowing for the natural environment to inform every aspect of our making process. So before I start, I think it's really important for me that everyone knows what mohair is. It's the hair of an Angora goat, and they have a haircut twice a year, and that hair is what's known as mohair. It is one of the world's most ancient, exclusive, and sustainable natural fibers. And in textiles, it's often termed the diamond fiber because it's so rare, but it also has very beautiful properties, such as its luster and its ability to have style and character and absorb dye very beautifully and not crease. But what very few people know, even within South Africa, is that 60% of the world's mohair comes from South Africa, specifically the Karoo, which is this semi-arid region. And that's where my family farm, and that's where we have our studio. And what is even more interesting is that all of the rest of the world's raw material comes to South Africa to be processed. So it becomes the center of the production and processing of mohair. And yet 80% of the global supply of mohair leaves our country in a very raw form, in a form of a top, which is the image in the middle. And so nothing is really done to beneficiate this raw material and to grow our own local textile industry. And I really felt that if we wanted to be the home of mohair and speak to all these brilliant properties and also this very unique South African heritage, that we had to start making pieces at home. And that's really where our brand started, to try and build this circular and local supply chain to work with mohair. Just to bring it back to FIT, we started last year with a course with Lorenza Wong, Farm to Fabric to Fashion. And we're really excited next year to be offering a study abroad program to come to South Africa. And I guess the premise of what we're trying to do is that I feel very strongly that it's time for fashion and textiles to start to be informed by nature, instead of continually asking nature to adjust itself to the needs of fashion. And what I never understand is that in any other industry, you're only a master of your craft when you understand your materials. And yet, for fashion and textiles, this is our biggest problem. There's hardly any understanding of materials, where they come from, and the service chain to get to a fabric. And I think this is exactly the kind of education that we are trying to do at FIT and through the study abroad. For example, what I mean by this disconnect is that we often have brands that will come to us and say, oh, we really want to source mohair from your farm, but we only work with kid mohair, which is fine. But if you spend any time on a farm, you'll realize that kid mohair is the first 2 times a goat has had a haircut, and it can live up to 12 years. So what we're trying to do in this course, and my thinking is that should we as a fashion industry not be asking, what can we create that speaks to a full life cycle of a fiber, the ecosystem in which it lives in, instead of continually trying to squeeze materials into outfits which may fit but are not in season. And I think that if we can start making from a place of understanding the ingredients, then any designer will become extraordinary in our industry, because this knowledge scarcely exists. And this is very specific to, well, you'll find it in a lot of communities, but on the African continent, this is a very normal way of making, and I believe a very necessary movement that we need to see in the fashion industry. And so I would love to see future fashion designers designing by being inspired by the ingredients of their materials and making pieces that speak to the full kind of possibility of what that fiber could be, instead of just running to a fabric store and buying something, anything. Maybe you look at a barcode to see if it's sustainable, but with no understanding of where that comes from. And so it's really time that I think we need to start making pieces from land level up, instead of this focus on collection down. And what we're trying to do in the Farm to Fabric course is to bring the farm into, and the fiber and the people into the classroom, and through the study abroad to the land. And we say this with brands, with everyone working higher up in the service chain, in that only when you come down to land level will you feel its energy, will you understand the quality of the soil, the importance of water, the textures and the hues of plant life, the importance of herdsmen and farmers, and you get to share stories and food around a table. And all of these things make up your understanding of a material, not only its specific qualities. And I really believe that sustainable materials don't start in design studios or in factories. It starts with rainfall. And once you understand all the actors and the elements that need to get from rainfall to the runway, it is impossible not to feel responsible for what you do with that material, because you know the impact that your choices have on a long line of people and animals, and ultimately the preservation of land. But I feel like if we don't make these connections today, then we are purely following barcodes which say that they're sustainable, and it removes us as humans from having any kind of personal responsibility for what we do with those facts and figures. And so what we're doing in this course, and what's very specific to our style of making, is that we really believe that value comes from understanding an ecosystem of where your fabrics and fashion come from, and buying into this whole circular ecosystem instead of simply buying from it. And I think that if we can achieve that, even just with a handful of makers or designers, it would be so much kinder and so much more relevant to what we need in our industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. I will share now. You can see that?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Francis. I'm Professor Wong, everyone. Hi. And what a powerful introduction to the course, right? Francis has obviously set the way for this course. So in spring 2024, the Textile Development and Marketing graduating seniors capstone course was the Farm to Fabric. And here in this course, we explored both plant and animal fibers. And truly what we decided here was to talk about forgotten fibers. Fibers coming from mohair, which is from South Africa, abaca and piña, where I come from the Philippines, and Jacob wool, which is from the United States. We wanted the engagement with the student, the ability to understand that plant and animal is an important element of farm because they're very dependent on each other. So when we developed this course, it was important that we have the representation of both plant and animal. Like Francis, I have our farm in the Philippines that have abaca. So it was just a perfect combination for us to bring this to light to the students, something that they may not be familiar, but we call it forgotten fibers because these fibers are actually endemic to these regions. And it's also ancestral and generational, just like a parallel to mohair. Abaca is 99% of abaca comes from the Philippines, and it's used in many indigenous materials as well as industrial materials. So here, the course was really focused on hands-on projects for the students to be able to be guided from raw material to raw fiber to finished material. The students were able to develop a sustainable brand with a marketing strategy rooted in farm to fabric principles. Our focus was really connecting with the fibers, connecting with the farmers, the spinners and artisans and industry experts, fostering an appreciation really of the people and the processes behind each material. The course culminates in graduating students to be able to showcase their capstone projects in our Farm to Fabric exhibition. So I wanted to take you to this journey, focusing on mohair and highlighting what was done in class. And I really want to thank Frances for really coming with us to this journey because it wouldn't have been possible without her and her support and sponsorship of all materials. So here is the farm Frances Angora goats in the Karoo in the Prince Albert region. These are the raw mohair fibers that was supplied from the class by Francis Van Hasselt's studio, as well as the South Africa Mohair Board. Here are the fibers that are ready to be spun into yarn. The students were able to learn how to spin the mohair with other fibers. The goal was to really engage and allow the students to experience and feel each fiber, and while they're doing this is to really think about the people that has touched this material prior for them making their own materials. Here are some of the students' woven projects. The goal of the class was to make it all handmade and to really make it raw. I expected no perfections from the students, although their goal was to make it perfect, but we were looking for the beauty of all and every material that they were able to use. Here are also some of the knit projects of the students, and the push was really to make everything handmade because I felt that this was an opportunity for the students to really push the way they think, that there is another model that exists, and that the goal is really to be able to create a community within themselves. We were able to also dye some of the fibers that were provided for us by the use of our natural dye garden on the 9th floor at FIT. It was fun activities for the student to see how both plant and animal fibers react differently in the natural dyes, all because we wanted to create a better future, all because we felt that the future of fashion is handmade. Also, the students, as this is a development class, we had an opportunity, some of the students had an opportunity to create their designs and work with Frances and her artisans to be able to weave their vision. And these are what was highlighted in the exhibition. There were these two, and beside these pictures are the weavers at Frances' studio. On the capstone presentation, this was really where students, each and every one, were able to really show what they've all made. And it was really an incredible experience for them as well as all of us, because we felt such empowerment in each and every one of them. And it was highlighted in a exhibition in the beginning of the semester, just to highlight the work that the student has done to showcase how important this message is to a school like FIT. And to cap it, we have created an editorial publication of the process from fiber to materials, highlighting each and every individual who will involve in the class, because there were so many people that were involved aside from Frances and the community in South Africa. But not only that, but we also had the community at FIT who supported this class. So thank you. Oh, wait, hold on. My apologies. I think I just wanted to share the last slide. And again, I want to thank Frances for, can you see my slide? Yeah. Sorry. Yes, the last slide, I'm so sorry. Frances already mentioned my farm to fabric study abroad. And so I just, again, wholeheartedly want to thank Frances, and we're very excited to focus on 3 cities. We were able to be involved and to really experience the land and environment that Frances has spoken about earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorenza. That was, and Frances. Bupe, do you have any comments about the conversation we heard? And then you can lead into the panel discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a beautiful presentation, and I think it was also important just to learn about the sustainable components that go into them. The first question I had was for Frances, and it was seeing that South Africa does provide about like 60 to 80% of mohair that goes towards the global scale. So how do you balance sustainability and exporting while still making sure that we, like as South Africans, have access to that as well as South African artisans?
Can I be unmute? Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I think that firstly, in terms of sustainability, what makes this an amazingly sustainable fiber just in itself is because of the area in South Africa that it gets farmed, which is this Karoo, which is semi-arid. And so for any of you who come from a desert, you will know that it's a naturally regenerative ecosystem because you're so affected by the elements. So you have to farm in a way that looks after your animals, and you'll make sure that the rain falls on a plant that's going to survive. So the plant life, the land, and the animals. And so as a result, it's a very sustainable fiber in just its way of being produced. And out of the natural fibers, I think it's by far the most certified. I think 82% of mohair coming out of South Africa has the Textile Exchange Responsible Mohair Standard, which is unheard of in terms of fibers. So it's really amazing and world class. And I think that the problem comes with the fact that a lot of materials, I'm speaking specifically to the African context, are phenomenal, and we don't have a very formal textile industry. So a lot of it goes away to areas like Italy or Japan or China to be processed into luxury apparel or apparel. And I think that the biggest thing that we can do is know that it's sustainable, know that it's good quality, but also make our local designers aware of what is available. And I know that Mohair South Africa, as well as the wool industry and other industries, make a big effort to sponsor designers, to sponsor materials. And the biggest thing is that at home, we don't have a formal textile industry, so it's very small. And we need to sponsor materials in order to get designers to feel comfortable working with it, because they are also expensive, not because they are being exported, just in the way that they're very valuable. So there's a lot of work being done, and I think it's a super exciting space to be in. I mentioned on our previous call that there is actually a platform, a Nigerian platform called Roundabout, which was established for this very reason, to show African designers what raw materials or what production capacity there is close to them or just within the continent. So that is definitely happening, and I think it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you. And then in terms of highlighting just the cultural awareness as well as the history of mohair, how do you see the blending of tradition in the farming practices that you do, as well as just the weaving and knitting practices? I'm curious to know if you incorporate any of like the South African tribes that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like community is very, very important. And in the Karoo, we have it's very Afrikaans, and it has a very specific cultural group that live here. And we are very, the artisans, the herdsmen. We can't have a practice without everyone in the value chain. And they are certainly incorporated in the story. And we try and I think that the biggest, what you're trying to say and what I feel very strongly about, that is the problem with fashion at the moment, is that we don't see the every role player in the supply chain. So I always say, like a herdsman, I was teaching a master's textile class in Italy, and these brilliant students stopped me halfway through and they said, sorry, what is a herdsman and how do you spell that? And I think that, in my opinion, anyone can be a designer. You might be average or you might be brilliant, but very few people could be a herdsman, because you have to understand the land, the animals, the climate, and yet they're never spoken about. And designers, and this is why I think our course with Lorenza is so important, if you don't know better, you don't do better. And I think that a lot of designers in the fashion industry have no idea the impact that their design choices make on a long line of people and animals and land. And I think it's a very important thing to highlight.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that you touched on that, because it leads to the question that I had for Professor Wong, in that during this program, do students get educated on like the history of South Africa and how it relates to just textiles as well as the fashion in the country, and just outside of textiles as well? Do they get a bit of background? Of course, there's this huge history, so you can't really give a course on it, but I am curious in that regard.
Oh, thank you very much, Bupe. That's an amazing question. Actually, a very good one, because I think in day one, we really pushed the envelope to the students. It's a very different way of bringing out a class to them, because we started to understand the land, we started to understand the environment. We asked them to really understand and read about on mohair, the 4 fibers in the class. It was very new to them, granted that they know the process of making textiles from fiber to yarn to materials and a final garment. They were never really exposed in the sense of who are the people behind and what makes some of these forgotten fibers or ancestral fibers quite important to a community and building communities. So as much as this class is a textile class, it was so much focus on the people behind is what we have to highlight, and that we did highlight. It's touching what they feel so strongly, and a message that, Francis and I always talk about is what keeps them up at night. What is their story? It's really giving life to all the people that we never see so that we can allow to give meaning to these materials that they do. This class was purposeful and intentional. Everything they have to make has to have intention. Even the course that they're going through has to be an intentional that you really wanted to go because you wanted to know and wanted to understand all about the behind the scenes that we've never highlighted ever. So I hope that helps. It's a 15-week course. It was overwhelming. They're graduate, but I think for them this is so different, giving them an ability to think a little bit more outside the box.
Absolutely. I'm happy to hear that because I know that the study abroad program is like 2.5 weeks. And so I can imagine that will be overwhelming just to like fit all of that into that 2.5 weeks. So I hope that the prospective students that do go on that trip are able to, take away all the substance and the insight of South Africa and just the rich history that we have.
Yeah, I mean, would really love for the students who are taking the capstone course to go to the farm to fabric, study abroad, and vice versa, right? Because I think, everything that they would do will be in a moment that they would have to think about, because this is not just random making, but there has to be meaning to everything that they make. We wanted to create stories to give life to the materials they're making.
Absolutely. Interesting. Are there any questions from the attendees and the participants? We have one question from Moira. I am interested in how does the farm to fiber movement interact with ready-to-wear or sweater manufacturers, those large companies?
I think it doesn't in many ways, and does in some. And I think that there are very, very few. Well, the way that we produce is definitely not large scale, and it can't be. And it's so funny, everyone always thinks like scalability, or what is a scalability model? And I actually, this is my personal opinion, I don't really think that the scalability model works for a lot of cases or is relevant in a lot of cases. And I think that we have to start looking at new models of making, which are actually very old models of making, kind ways of making, being able to answer the question of why. Why have you made this? Why is it important? Why is it needed? Why? And I don't think that many, I think a lot of fashion is a business. It's the business of fashion. And I believe that the reason why it's broken is because it's focused so much on the business side of it and monetary, instead of asking itself why. And that's why I speak to these sustainability claims, because now everyone in the fashion industry is desperately trying to be sustainable without any connection as to what that means. And I'll give an example. So in my talk, I mentioned South African mohair farmers are very advanced in that 82% of our mohair is certified. But then you have Lesotho, which is a tiny little country within South Africa, and it's a kingdom, it's very beautiful, and it's the second largest producer of mohair in the world. And almost no mohair in Lesotho is globally certified. And my frustration is that that does not mean it's not sustainable. We just haven't accounted for this way of making. They're kingdoms. They don't have, they can't give a regenerative land plan. They have 5 or 15 goats. They farm very differently, but it's almost a spiritual practice, and it's almost more sustainable than anything else. And I think we need to really, if you're not connected to your source and everyone who's involved, I am very concerned that you're just following barcodes when actually, if you're a brand and you're like, oh, Lesotho doesn't have certified mohair, I'm not going to source from it anymore. What you're actually doing is a complete reverse to what you say you want to achieve, because you're actually killing ecosystems and livelihoods and some of the most vulnerable and beautiful practices. And that's really what I meant by saying that in any industry, if you're an architect, if you're an artist, if you're a chef, when you are exceptional, it's when you understand truly what you're working with, ingredients. And if we can bring it back to that, and that's why I said this farm to fabric and the study abroad, and I hope that some of you out there are hoping to do the study abroad and then do the class, because understanding materials is like coming to the land, realizing there are multiple different narratives for South Africa, there are multiple different realities. What is the heat like? What is the landscape like? What is the language like? What does the food taste like? And then you have a connection to what you're doing and you feel responsible for what you then do down the line. But otherwise, I believe we're dreaming up collections that we don't actually need anymore without it really mattering. And I think that fashion and textiles does matter. It impacts every single one of us every day. And it has a very beautiful and powerful story and impact to be made. We just need to be connected again. So I hope, I don't know, I get carried away. Sorry.
Well, actually, it was very exciting. In the beginning, the students were thinking about how to scale because they were supposed to create a brand. But I think, my push for them is this is slow fashion. And they didn't get it in the beginning, and that this is luxe. But in 4 weeks in the semester, they realize how difficult it can be. And when they started feeling and getting connected to the fibers, it was so easy for them to understand that, yes, this is slow fashion, and this is the message that we're giving to them. So they got it. So their goal was to really create a whole story out of what they're doing, because they already understood that this is not a scaling model. And that was the intention. Like I said, everything was done intentionally in every process. And I wanted the student to understand that this is a different model, that it will work, but in a different platform. So take the course, right? Take the study abroad is amazing. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And just to add to what Lorenzo was saying, is that what this course also teaches you is how do you then convey that message to someone who hasn't done the course? How do you then sell a sweater, for example, that has taken you a month to make and make someone see value in it, to see it in a different way of luxury? And I think that this is an interesting thing, like what is luxury? And is it a price point, or is it a story, or is it something very special? And to teach the students that value, if you think of the wine industry, we have been taught to ask, what wine is in this region? Who was the winemaker? Why is it special? And in the same way, we should be asking that in textiles to understand value. Where does it come from? Why is this fiber special? How long did it take to make? Who made it? What is the story? What is the message it's trying to share? And I think that that's a very powerful way of understanding true value and luxury going forward. And that's part of the course, to try and not only make things in a different way, but how do you convey that message then to a wider audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I know I'm gonna hand over to Helen, because I know that concludes the discussion.
Yes, thank you all so much. Each of you spoke to a different way for us to understand textiles in South Africa. And many of us don't know that much about them. And so thank you very much for sharing and being here with us today. Yeah, I wish we had longer, I wish we had more time, but Bupe, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone, Francis and Lorenza and Elizabeth. Thank you for joining us, and thank you all for coming to Globally Connected. We'll see you again. We have another presentation on November 20th, and it's a woman who's from the Taos Puebla, who's a fashion designer, Patricia Michaels. So please look out for that invitation. And thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.